Professor Dave Explains recently released a video about Michael Egner, a neurosurgeon who now works for the Discovery Institute, peddling pseudoscientific arguments for the existence of an immaterial soul through a Christian lens. I left a pretty harmless comment underneath his video. You're kind of picking the easy targets RE materialism though. Would love to get your take on NDEs. Don't get me wrong, I've got no problem with YouTube educators exposing bad arguments. In my opinion, Professor Dave is doing God's work when it comes to exposing harmful frauds like Deepak Chopra, Actualized.org, and the Discovery Institute. And I can tell that he really cares about pushing against those who would lie about science to push a regressive theocratic agenda, as he puts it. What I do take issue with, though, is his utter confidence when it comes to materialism. He replied to my comment, by the way. This is not an easy target, and NDEs occur in the brain. Wow, coming across a little defensive there, Professor? This is not an easy target. Remembering that this dude spends most of his video pointing out just how fallacious and idiotic Egner's arguments are, and I agree with him. Michael Egner's arguments are weak, which is exactly why I call them an easy target. So, which is it, Dave? Is he not an easy target, or does he have weak arguments? 'Cause it's either or, I'm afraid. And doesn't that response just tell you everything you need to know about the absolute state of YouTube skepticism? It's instant dismissal instead of curiosity. Let me just lay my cards on the table. I am not a Christian, nor do I watch the Discovery Institute. What I'm trying to say is that I've got no skin in this game other than a desire to know the truth, which is the very same desire that motivates the scientific enterprise, as I'm sure Dave's fans would agree. See, this video is not going to be about Michael Egner or the Discovery Institute. It's about a very specific attitude displayed by people like Professor Dave Explains when it comes to materialism and purported mystical phenomena. To Dave's credit, he does say something near the beginning of his video that did give me some hope.
We can't have access to the supernatural world, were it to exist, because if we did, then it would be defined as natural and we could study it scientifically. The scientific method and evidence-based experimentation are the only way to get to any kind of truth regarding the physical world around us, and any alleged supernatural phenomena are necessarily beyond the scope of scientific inquiry because they are considered to be outside the realm of observable, measurable, and repeatable natural processes.
Okay, so far so good. Dave is admitting that even if supernatural phenomena were to exist, they would be essentially unfalsifiable, meaning science cannot deal with them by definition, as science works by testing hypotheses for falsifiability. Agreed. But you can see the problem with this though, right? If the supernatural were measurable, it would cease to be supernatural, meaning we've defined certain questions out of existence before we even get to ask them. Let me offer a quote. This is Marilyn Ferguson speaking about a model proposed by a guy named Pribram. Currently, he is proposing a startling, all-encompassing model that is generating considerable excitement among those intrigued by the mysteries of human consciousness. His holographic model marries brain research to theoretical physics. It accounts for normal perception and simultaneously takes the paranormal and transcendental experiences out of the realm of the supernatural by explaining them as a part of nature. Like certain strange discoveries of quantum physics, the radical reorientation of this theory suddenly makes sense of paradoxical sayings of mystics throughout the ages. This is, by the way, taken from a declassified INSCOM document reviewed by the CIA, which just talks about out-of-body experiences, casually, along with a bunch of other absolutely bonkers stuff. Well, it just so happens that Michael Egner's claims look like weak sauce next to the voluminous amounts of research that have been done on NDEs. For those of you who don't know, my original comment under Professor Dave's video was referring to near-death experiences, a genuinely interesting phenomenon that, at the very least, deserves to be looked into, even if just on a neurobiological basis, rather than brushed under the carpet as just the hallucinations of a dying brain, as YouTubers like Professor Dave so often do. It's an automatic habit at this point, and it raises an eyebrow for me as it would seem to suggest that these lovers of science cannot be bothered to do even the most cursory amount of research into this quite frankly freaky phenomenon of consciousness. So, what is the phenomenon? The phenomenon. After facing a life-threatening event, often one in which the body's blood flow and breathing stopped completely for a period of time, some people report extremely vivid experiences involving complex visual, auditory, and emotional sensations, among other stimuli. These are termed near-death experiences, or NDEs. Among the most commonly reported elements of NDEs are life reviews, in which the subject sees or relives all the events of their life up to that point in exhaustive detail, often within the span of an experience that only lasts a few seconds or minutes. This is probably the origin of the life flashing before your eyes trope, but it's usually much more than that. Many experiencers report being able to feel the emotional impact their actions had on others, as though from a first-person perspective. Imagine your life review is a kind of video game cutscene, only you can zap into the minds of every NPC to feel exactly how you affected them with your choices. It's kind of like that. Some other common elements include meetings with deceased loved ones, the presence of divine or sometimes demonic beings, passing through a tunnel of light, yada yada. The data. Okay, by now you're probably thinking, hey man, that's real cool and all, but it's not exactly evidence of consciousness beyond the brain, okay? Like, it's neat that you get to feel like you're being reunited with your dead grandma whilst you're getting a hug from God as you're kicking the bucket, but this ain't no smoking gun. We'll get back to that. For now, let's look into some of the most intriguing data from the research that we have. The Pam Reynolds case, documented by neurosurgeon Robert Speltzer in 1991. During a hypothermic cardiac arrest brain surgery, Reynolds' body temperature and EEG dropped to near zero, yet she later recalled specific details about the procedure, including the shape of the bone saw and conversations between staff. Maria's shoe, from the Journal of Near-Death Studies, documented by Kimberly Clark Sharp in 1985. A cardiac arrest patient named Maria described floating out of her body and seeing a tennis shoe on a hospital ledge, later confirmed by staff exactly where and how she described it, impossible to see from her room. The Pim van Lommel et al. Study from 2001, titled Near-Death Experience in Survivors of Cardiac Arrest, a prospective study in the Netherlands, offers this. 62 patients, 18% reported NDE, of whom 41, 12%, described a core experience. We do not know why so few cardiac patients report NDE after CPR, though age plays a part. With a purely physiological explanation such as cerebral anoxia for the experience, most patients who have been clinically dead should report one. In the comment chain that resulted from my response to Professor Dave, user Tomato Dragonzord, for a huge deal like mind working independently on the brain, we need the evidence to be extraordinary, groundbreaking, undeniable. Anecdotes or studies without strong conclusions just won't cut it. But is this the right way to think? I remember Aaron Ra saying something along the lines of, if we can find even one example of a fossil that's out of its time, like for example a duck in the Triassic or something, then the entire theory of evolution by natural selection would crumble right there and then. Does the same logic not apply to things like out-of-body experiences and veridical phenomena? I don't know, I feel like if there's even one confirmed case, that's already worth looking into on its own. I, for one, am suspicious that consciousness is not being studied in the depth that it could be because the field of so-called paranormal or supernatural studies has been so thoroughly delegitimized, both by charlatans at the Discovery Institute and, dare I say it, by those who presuppose a mechanistic, materialistic explanation to every phenomenon, which make up the vast proportion of our modern scientific community. Professor Dave himself even admits in his video that materialism is so thoroughly baked into modern science's understanding that it's basically a given. How can you see this as anything other than ossified thinking? Now onto some of the more challenging lines of evidence for such material presuppositions. Dr. Bruce Greyson, a top G in the field of NDE research, laid down 9 lines of supporting evidence for the veracity of near-death experiences as a phenomenon extraneous to the human brain. Say them with me now. Number 1. Lucid, organized experiences while unconscious, comatose, or clinically dead. The idea with this one is that the body is under such stress and the brain so oxygen deprived that coherent conscious experiences should be out of the question. The quote on screen mentions that not only do near-death experiences report such things anyway, but often even report supernormal states of consciousness. And supernormal in this case refers to a conscious experience that is described subjectively as more aware and alert than ordinary waking consciousness. Number 2. Seeing ongoing events from a location apart from the physical body while unconscious, out-of-body experiences, or OBEs. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It's stuff like the Mary's shoe case that I mentioned earlier. Veridical phenomena, basically. About 45% of near-death experiences report some kind of OBE. Number 3. Near-death experiences with vision in the blind and supernormal vision. This one's hella interesting. It turns out that there are many cases of individuals who have been blind from birth reporting NDEs that are intensely visual. We'll talk about the consistency between the broad content of NDEs when we reach point 8. Number 4. Near-death experiences that occur while under general anesthesia. Normally, following cardiac arrest, there is a period of amnesia prior to and following the arrest. EEGs go flat, and brain activity basically reduces to a point where organized, lucid experiences should not be possible, if we're following a strictly mechanistic conception of the mind. And yet, a certain percentage of cardiac arrest patients report such experiences anyway. Number 5. Near-death experiences and life reviews. We mentioned this one earlier. The life review may include awareness of what others were feeling and thinking at the time earlier in their life when they interacted with them. This previously unknown awareness of what other people were feeling or thinking when they interacted with them is often surprising and unexpected to the NDEs. Number 6. Encountering deceased loved ones in near-death experiences. Again, pretty self-explanatory. People meeting dead loved ones or relatives, sometimes who they didn't even know were deceased prior to the NDE, in their experience. Number 7. Near-death experiences of young children. Investigation of near-death experiences in very young children is important because at an early age they are less likely to have established religious beliefs, cultural understandings about death, or even an awareness of what death is. Very young children would be very unlikely to have heard about near-death experiences or understand them. Nonetheless, these show up in very young kids with strikingly similar characteristics as those described by adults. Number 8. Cross-cultural study of near-death experiences. Here's that meat you were promised. There was a study which concluded all near-death experience elements appearing in Western NDEs are present in non-Western NDEs. There are many non-Western NDEs with narratives that are strikingly similar to the narratives of typical Western NDEs. At a minimum, it may be concluded that non-Western NDEs are much more similar to Western NDEs than dissimilar. Number 9. Near-death experience after effects. This one's particularly striking. Those who experience NDEs commonly report lifelong after effects, which are overwhelmingly described as positive. The study on screen, conducted by Pim van Lommel, MD, divided survivors of cardiac arrest into a group that had NDEs and a group that did not. The after effects of both groups were assessed 2 and 8 years after the cardiac arrests. The group of cardiac arrest survivors with NDEs were statistically more likely to have a reduced fear of death, increased belief in life after death, interest in the meaning of life, acceptance of others, and were more loving and empathetic. And that point about after effects brings me to another YouTuber in the modern online skepticism scene whose dismissal struck me as particularly short-sighted. Now let's talk about Britt Hartley, or no-nonsense spirituality. Britt says in her video on NDEs that when a patient mentions that they've been looking into near-death experiences, she knows that it's time for them to do death work together. Accepting death, basically. Aside from being a really condescending thing to say to someone, this is, I suppose, meant to imply that she finds the study of NDEs to be counter-therapeutic. Yet an improved life is literally one of the 9 lines of evidence. So does she care more about her patients or about defending her materialist worldview? I'm going to offer another Bruce Greyson quote here. Even if NDEs are physiological or psychological states without exogenous causes, they are unique among such states by virtue of their profound and lasting transformations of personality. But Britt just ain't buying it. In this short, Britt says,
the fact that nature, through nothing but evolution in neurons, has built a system that gives you a hug and soothes you as you die is deeply human.
But that's exactly the issue, isn't it, Britt? There is no selective mechanism for a dying brain to do this. Natural selection works by passing on the genes of those fit to survive and reproduce. Once you're already on the edge of death, you're out of the game. There's no way to pass on genes for having an NDE to your children, because without modern medical equipment, you're already dead. She also says,
that's not a glitch in the system, that's your mind doing what it's always done, protecting you, interpreting your experience, finding meaning in a meaningless universe, helping you transition through the biggest unknown any of us will ever face.
The thing is, even if you think there's no good reason to think NDEs suggest that consciousness can operate independently of the brain, don't you think that they are at least interesting enough to look into even on a neurobiological basis, especially considering their purported beneficial effects? Why is there not more interest surrounding this topic from the scientific and skeptic communities? Real skepticism isn't about knowing what's false. It's about being willing to find out what's true, even when it doesn't fit your worldview. As Einstein said, man should look for what is, not for what he thinks should be. First issue that blocks our understanding of consciousness, in my view, is equating the mind with consciousness. Consciousness is not the phenomena that arise within consciousness, it is the silent witness that perceives them all. So what threshold of evidence would you accept as meaningful, dear viewer? Remember that our boy Nikola Tesla said, the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. So Nikola Tesla or Professor Dave, anyone? Nikola Tesla or Britt Hartley? Tesla, who came up with the AC power system, the Tesla coil, and the induction motor, or Professor Dave, who says non-physical phenomena are necessarily outside the scope of scientific inquiry? I reserved my best ad hominem attacks for the very end of the video so that only the real ones would get it. Like, let's be real, if smugness had a face, it'd be this channel icon. He's the actually meme. Just kidding. I love you, Professor Dave. I love your series on evolution.